Harlem, New York. 2:43 p.m. Saturday, September 12, 1964. The late summer heat clings to 135th Street like a fever. Steam rises from the asphalt where morning rain has turned to vapor, mixing with the exhaust from idling Cadillacs and the sweet stench of garbage baking in metal cans. Outside Minton's Playhouse, 3 elderly men in suspenders sit on milk crates, playing dominoes and watching the street with the practiced vigilance of those who've survived too much history. 17-year-old Michael Johnson walks past them in pressed khakis and a white button-down shirt his Aunt Sarah irons every morning. He's got his uncle's intelligent eyes, but none of his instincts. Not yet. He carries a geometry textbook under his arm and 50 cents in his pocket for the subway home. He's Bumpy Johnson's sister's boy, the nephew being groomed for Howard University, not the life. At the corner of Lenox Avenue, Vincent Pretty Vinny Torino leans against a cream-colored Impala with jersey plates, 26 years old. Italian. Gold tooth. Shark-skin suit despite the heat. He's been pushing heroin in Harlem for 8 months, ever since his Genovese family connections convinced him the old rules died when Bumpy went to Alcatraz. He sees Michael approaching and smiles. He knows exactly whose nephew this is. That's precisely why he does it. "Hey, college boy," Pretty Vinny calls out, loud enough for the entire block to hear. "You looking to feel like a real man today? First taste is free, even for Bumpy's House N.S." Michael stops walking. The domino game goes silent. The street holds its breath. Pretty Vinny pushes himself off the car, approaching with the swagger of a man who believes respect is negotiable. He presses a glassine envelope, stamped with a blue devil, into Michael's palm, whispering about how the old black kings in Harlem don't understand the new world, how times have changed, how Italian blood runs the show now. "Tell your uncle," Pretty Vinny says, loud enough for witnesses, that Pretty Vinny don't bow to no washed-up N. His time is over. My time is now. Michael takes the envelope, not because he wants to, because 20 people are watching, and saying no feels like admitting something he can't name. By 8:17 p.m. that same night, Michael Johnson is convulsing on his mother's bathroom floor. The heroin was cut with battery acid and strychnine. His lips are blue. His breathing is shallow. The sound of his mother's screams carries 3 buildings in every direction. By 9:45 p.m., the ambulance arrives. Too late. By 10:23 p.m., Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson receives the phone call at his apartment on West 123rd Street. He's sitting at his chess table reading Langston Hughes, a cup of coffee growing cold beside him. He listens without interrupting. No shouting, no panic, just breathing. Deep. Controlled. Every word from the other end of the line is a piece on his mental chessboard: teenage nephew, heroin, Italian, Lenox Corner, racial slurs, witnesses. He hangs up at 10:27 p.m., 10:28 p.m. He straightens his tie, he buttons his jacket, he walks to the mirror and adjusts his glasses. His face is granite. The anger is there. But it is compressed into something far more dangerous than rage. By 11:15 p.m., 3 of his most trusted men are in his living room, hats in hand, waiting for orders. They expect violence. An explosion. A demand to drag the dealer into the street. Instead, Bumpy speaks softly, each word measured, surgical. "You don't touch him tonight," he says. "You watch. You listen. You find out who told him he could poison my blood and disrespect my family in public." He pauses, removing his glasses to clean them with methodical precision. "Then, you tell him this from me. Enjoy the weekend. Come Monday, his name disappears from this earth." 72 hours later, Sanitation workers across 5 boroughs will make discoveries that will haunt them for the rest of their lives. A hand in the Bronx. A leg in Brooklyn. A torso in Queens, a head in Staten Island. Arms in Manhattan. Each wrapped in yesterday's newspaper with a handwritten note in perfect cursive, "Disrespect has no borders." Neither do the consequences. The story of how Vincent Torino lost everything is a warning that history has tried to hide. If you enjoy these deep dives into the underworld, you can support the channel by buying me a coffee using the link in the description. Your support keeps these investigations alive. Now let's go back to September 12, 1964. Harlem, New York. September 1964. The neighborhood wears the facade of 1948, but the rules have been rewritten in blood. Neon still bleeds over Lenox Avenue, church ladies still march to Sunday service in white gloves, but the faces behind the money are different. Italian families have pressed deeper into black territory with the patience of predators and the precision of accountants. The Genovese, Lucchese, and Gambino names now echo in Harlem barbershops where they were once unthinkable. They aren't content with numbers rackets anymore. They want everything that can be sold. And heroin is the cheapest kind of gold. When Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson returned from Alcatraz 11 months earlier, he found his kingdom transformed into occupied territory. The heroin trade, once governed by unwritten laws that protected the vulnerable, had become indiscriminate and brutal. Teenagers collapsed in schoolyards. Mothers buried children who never reached 20. The old understanding that there were lines you did not cross, ages you did not touch, places you did not poison, had been abandoned for raw profit. Bumpy's code was not written, but it functioned as natural law. Children were sacred, existing outside the geometry of criminal enterprise. Families were inviolable sanctuaries that violence could not penetrate without triggering systematic retaliation. Public disrespect demanded mathematical consequences, calculated to restore balance and reinforce boundaries that kept chaos at bay. These weren't preferences or suggestions. They were the architecture of survival in a world where respect determined whether communities thrived or crumbled into addiction and despair. Michael Johnson was the living proof of that code. 17 years old, with his uncle's intelligent eyes and his mother's gentle disposition, he carried a 3.8 grade point average and dreams of studying engineering at Howard University. He played point guard for the high school basketball team, tutored younger kids in mathematics, and walked his grandmother to church every Sunday morning. Michael represented the possibility of escape, the clean branch on a dirty tree, the proof that the Johnson bloodline could produce something other than violence. He was never meant to be part of the game. Vincent "Pretty Vinny" Torino was 26 years old and terminally stupid. A mid-level Genovese associate with more ambition than survival instinct, he looked at Bumpy Johnson and saw a relic. He believed the old lion had lost his teeth in federal prison. Pretty Vinny tested boundaries with reckless arrogance, selling poison to younger customers, using racial slurs with casual cruelty, wearing sharkskin suits in September heat, and driving a cream-colored Impala with jersey plates like a neon advertisement for disrespect. He mistook Bumpy's silence for weakness and his patience for fear. Within 90 minutes of Michael's collapse, Bumpy's intelligence network activated with military precision. The invisible army of Harlem went to work, maids cleaning floors in midtown hotels, doormen on the Upper East Side, bartenders in Little Italy, street runners on every corner. They were the eyes of the city, more efficient than the nipped. The maids who cleaned Pretty Vinny's apartment building provided his daily routine. The doorman at his mistress's building confirmed his Thursday night patterns. Bartenders at 3 different establishments detailed his drinking habits, his associates, his boasts about moving weight without interference. By midnight, Bumpy possessed a complete dossier more thorough than any police file. At Harlem Hospital, Bumpy sat beside his sister Sarah for 37 minutes without speaking. The air smelled of antiseptic and suppressed terror. She held Michael's unconscious hand and wept silently, understanding that her brother's presence meant a debt had been recorded in blood. She looked at his hands, hands that had strangled men for less, and she didn't ask him to show mercy. She didn't plead for restraint. She knew that asking would be pointless, that the machinery of retribution had already begun turning. Because this was no longer about one dealer or one transaction. This was about resetting the rules for every criminal organization in New York, about demonstrating that certain lines remained absolute, regardless of who believed they held power. If Bumpy let this slide, the Genovese family would own Harlem by Christmas. At 1:43 a.m., Bumpy stood up, adjusted his jacket, and walked to the payphone in the lobby. He dialed a single number. When the voice answered, he didn't say hello. His voice was calm, measured, surgical. "I need 5 crews, 5 locations, and 5 days. Nobody moves until I give the word. This has to be perfect. This has to teach." September 13th, 12:30 a.m. Bumpy Johnson's apartment on West 123rd Street. 3 of his most trusted men stand in the living room with their hats in their hands, waiting for the explosion. They expect shouting, broken furniture, immediate orders to drag Pretty Vinny into the street and paint Lenox Avenue red. Instead, Bumpy removes his jacket with methodical precision, hangs it on the back of his chair, and orders Chinese food from the restaurant downstairs. While they wait, he sets up his chessboard and begins playing against himself, moving pieces with the concentration of a surgeon performing heart surgery. "Anger is a luxury I can't afford," he says, advancing a black knight without looking up. "Anger makes you predictable. Anger makes you sloppy. What we need is precision. What we need is a correction." He taps a white pawn with his index finger. This is Vinny. He moved too far, too fast, into the wrong territory. He touches the black king. This is me. I don't move until I understand the entire board. The systematic dismantling begins at 1:15 a.m. Pretty Vinny's heroin supplier, a Turkish immigrant named Mehmet, who operates out of a Red Hook warehouse, receives visitors. They don't threaten him. They don't touch him. They simply explain that continuing to supply Vincent Torino would be interpreted as a personal declaration of war against Bumpy Johnson. Mehmet, who has survived 3 decades in narcotics by understanding power dynamics, makes an immediate business decision. By 2 a.m., he has terminated their arrangement permanently. At 3:47 a.m., 2 corrupt NIP detectives who have been accepting Pretty Vinny's protection payments arrive at his building. They return an envelope containing $400 in cash with apologies. They suggest he might want to relocate his business operations to a different jurisdiction. They leave before he can ask questions. By 6:20 a.m., 3 of Pretty Vinny's street dealers have vanished. Not arrested, not killed. Simply gone, as if they never existed. Their corners are empty. Their phones disconnected. At 9:15 a.m., Pretty Vinny's regular customers begin receiving visits from polite men in clean suits who deliver a simple message. Purchasing product from Vincent Torino is no longer advisable for health reasons. The paranoia sets in like fever. Pretty Vinny moves to a backup apartment in Washington Heights. Paying cash up front, he starts carrying 2 pistols, a .38 revolver in his waistband, and a .25 automatic strapped to his ankle. Sleep becomes impossible. Every footstep in the hallway sounds like execution approaching. He tries calling his Genovese connections for support. The phones ring unanswered. The made men who promised protection have become unreachable ghosts. September 14th, 2:33 p.m. A package arrives at his new apartment. Inside is the glassine envelope stamped with the Blue Devil, the exact one he pressed into Michael Johnson's palm 3 days earlier. It's empty now. Tucked inside is a handwritten note on heavy cardstock in perfect cursive. You gave this to the wrong child. By 11:47 p.m., he's at Port Authority bus terminal with $8,000 and a one-way ticket to Atlantic City. He's 15 feet from the departure gate when two nip detectives approach from opposite directions. They're polite. They ask him to accompany them for routine questioning regarding an unrelated matter. 4 hours later, they release him at 3:52 a.m. with apologies. No charges filed, just a gentle suggestion that perhaps he should go home and rest. Pretty Vinny returns to his Washington Heights apartment as dawn breaks. The door is unlocked. He knows he locked it. The lights are off. Sitting in the dark, hands folded on the kitchen table, wearing the same black suit he wore to Michael Johnson's funeral, is Bumpy Johnson. We need to discuss respect. The apartment is silent except for the steady hum of the refrigerator. Bumpy Johnson sits at the Formica kitchen table with the stillness of carved marble, his hands folded like a magistrate, preparing to deliver a mandatory sentence. Pretty Vinny stands by the door, his trembling fingers hovering near the .38 in his waistband, knowing that touching it means immediate death. Sit, Bumpy says. The word carries no emotion, no negotiation. It is pure instruction. Vinny obeys, his legs suddenly unreliable. Bumpy removes his glasses and begins cleaning them with a white handkerchief, the ritual so ordinary it becomes terrifying in its precision. You are confused about what this is, Vincent. You think this is about territory, about product. Those are business matters that can be negotiated. He returns the glasses to his face with methodical care. This is about mathematics, the arithmetic of disrespect. He leans forward slightly, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow fills the entire room. September 12th, 2:43 p.m., corner of Lenox Avenue and 135th Street. You spoke to my nephew. You used specific words. I need you to repeat those words now, exactly as you said them. Pretty Vinny's throat closes. The silence stretches until it becomes unbearable. Say them, Bumpy repeats. Vinny whispers the racial slurs he had shouted so proudly 3 days earlier. Each word falls like a stone into still water. He repeats the insults about washed-up kings and new management. In this quiet kitchen, stripped of his crew and his bravado, the language sounds small and ugly and permanent. Bumpy sits motionless throughout, demonstrating through his absolute stillness the crushing weight of certain choices, the mathematics of words that cannot be taken back. You poisoned my blood, Bumpy says when the recitation ends. You humiliated my family in public. You used words that can't be taken back. Your debt requires payment in kind. He folds the handkerchief with precise corners and returns it to his pocket. I'm going to give you a choice, Vincent, not because you deserve one, but because I want you to understand that what happens next is your decision. You can die quickly and quietly. Your body will be found in the Hudson River tomorrow morning. Your family will bury you whole. Or you can die as a public lesson that will protect every black child in Harlem for the next decade. Your death will become a warning that mothers whisper to their sons. Pretty Vinny looks across the table at the gray-haired man in the polite suit. His arrogance flares one final time. He mistakes civilization for weakness. He stands up and spits at Bumpy's polished shoes. Go to hell, old man. Do your worst. Bumpy looks down at the spit, then back up at Vinny. There is no anger in his eyes, only decision. So be it. Class is in session. The men who enter from the hallway are not street soldiers. They are specialists who understand anatomy and precision. They carry leather medical bags and unfold plastic sheeting with the practiced efficiency of surgeons. The execution that follows is clinical, methodical, performed with the detached professionalism of men turning a problem into components that can be distributed with mathematical accuracy. Bumpy moves to the living room desk. He takes out 5 pieces of heavy cardstock and a fountain pen. His penmanship is flawless as he writes the same message 5 times. Disrespect has no borders. Neither do the consequences. The dismemberment takes exactly 93 minutes. At 3:00 a.m., 5 black sedans pull away from different locations across the city, each carrying a carefully wrapped package and a handwritten warning destined for a different borough. September 15th. Dawn breaks over New York City with the false promise of an ordinary morning. Within 5 hours, that illusion will be systematically destroyed across 5 boroughs, each discovery timed with the precision of a military operation. 6:15 a.m. The Bronx. 2 sanitation workers making their rounds near Yankee Stadium lift a commercial dumpster behind a bodega on East 161st Street. Wrapped in yesterday's Daily News sports section, they find a severed hand, pale and rigid, the gold ring still catching the early light. Pinned directly through the palm with a steel tack is a note written in perfect cursive, "This hand touched my family." The older worker, a Korean War veteran who survived Incheon, vomits into the gutter. His partner calls the police with fingers that refuse to stop trembling. 7:43 a.m. Brooklyn. A jogger following her regular route through Prospect Park takes a shortcut behind the boathouse. She lifts the dumpster lid looking for a place to dispose of her water bottle and discovers a human leg severed cleanly at hip and knee, wrapped in clear plastic with surgical precision. The note attached with wire reads, "This leg walked into my territory." She runs screaming toward the park entrance, her morning routine permanently shattered. 8:20 a.m. Queens. Construction workers breaking ground on an apartment complex in Astoria uncover a human torso buried 18 inches below the surface. This discovery is different. There is no attached note. Instead, the message has been carved directly into the chest with medical precision. This heart showed no respect. The foreman shuts down the site immediately. 3 workers quit without collecting their pay. 9:05 a.m., Staten Island. Morning commuters boarding the ferry from St. George Terminal notice something floating near the dock. Vincent Torino's severed head bobs gently in the harbor water, eyes open, gold tooth glinting in the sunlight. The note is waterproofed in plastic and tied to his hair with fishing line. This mouth spoke poison. 2 women faint. The ferry departure is delayed for 3 hours. 10:30 a.m. Manhattan. Central Park, near the Harlem Mere. Both arms are arranged on a bench facing north toward Harlem, positioned as if the invisible body is still reaching toward the neighborhood 40 blocks away. The final note lies between the hands. These arms will never touch another child. An elderly man walking his dog finds them and sits on the adjacent bench, too shocked to move, staring at the message until police arrive. By noon, headlines scream the butcher of the boroughs. The city holds its breath. But in every precinct, the silence is deafening. Police sources admit off the record they have nothing. No witnesses, no fingerprints, no evidence beyond the body parts themselves. The execution was surgical, professional, impossibly clean. The Nip brass faces a calculated dilemma. They know exactly who ordered this, but knowing and proving exist in different universes, and Bumpy Johnson operates in the space between them where evidence goes to die. That evening, 5 Italian mob bosses convene an emergency meeting. They arrive ready for war, ready to burn Harlem to the ground. Then someone places copies of the 5 notes on the table. The room goes silent as they read the messages. The realization hit simultaneously. Pretty Vinny hadn't just sold drugs in the wrong territory. He had violated the most sacred rule of organized crime. He targeted a boss's family member. The rage shifts instantly. This wasn't aggression. This was justice. And every family in New York has just been forced to acknowledge that Bumpy Johnson's mathematics of respect remain absolute. September 16th, 2 p.m. The Acropolis Diner in Astoria, Queens. Neutral territory in a city where neutrality is an endangered species. The establishment sits wedged between an auto shop and a laundromat, chosen precisely because it belongs to neither side. Inside, the air carries the smell of burnt coffee and grease. But the real tension comes from two sets of eyes. Bumpy Johnson's men positioned near the windows, Genovese soldiers with thick necks stationed by the exits, a demilitarized zone surrounded by armed camps. Anthony Big Tony Salerno arrives in a black Lincoln Continental, his bulk filling the red vinyl booth like a mountain occupying a valley. 62 years old, with hands like catcher's mitts and a face carved from Sicilian granite, he is a high-ranking Genovese capo who understands that unnecessary wars drain treasuries faster than bullets drain bodies. Across from him, Bumpy Johnson sits perfectly upright, hat beside him, tie straight, expression unreadable as carved marble. Neither man extends a hand. Respect has already been quantified by the fact that both are here and both still breathing. Salerno doesn't offer apologies because apologies admit weakness, and weakness invites predators. Instead, he speaks the language of corporate liability, his tone flat and businesslike. Vincent Torino acted without authority. He violated protocols that exist for reasons both our organizations understand. He was a rogue element who misunderstood the boundaries of expansion. The Genovese family does not condone what he did. It is a disavowal, a political distancing. Salerno is effectively signing the death certificate retroactively, confirming that his organization will not seek retribution for a man who violated the fundamental codes. Bumpy stirs sugar into his coffee with methodical precision, though he has no intention of drinking it. His voice carries the temperature of a January funeral. The debt is paid. The lesson is taught. Your people understand the boundaries now. We have no quarrel with business, Anthony. We have a quarrel with disrespect. The handshake that follows is not friendship. It is a treaty signed in a diner booth, a contract written in the language of mutual survival. Both men grip with equal pressure, neither yielding dominance, both acknowledging that war would be catastrophic for the heroin trade that keeps their organizations profitable. The effects ripple through the underworld with the speed of electricity through copper wire. By midnight, heroin sales to minors drop to absolute zero. Dealers who previously sold to teenagers suddenly develop strict age verification protocols. The Blue Devil stamp that marked Pretty Vinny's lethal product disappears from circulation as if it never existed. Street corners that once operated without conscience now function under restored codes that recognize certain customers are permanently off limits. September 18th. Harlem Hospital, room 347. Michael Johnson has been conscious for 2 days, his body purging the poison with the resilience of youth. Bumpy sits beside the bed reading Langston Hughes' poetry aloud, his massive hands holding the book with surprising delicacy. He peels an orange into sections, placing them within Michael's reach. The tenderness is absolute, impossible to reconcile with the man who orchestrated surgical dismemberment 72 hours earlier. It is a terrifying duality, the monster and the guardian occupying the same suit, separated only by the necessity of the moment. The community response splits along predictable lines. Publicly, silence. The newspapers demand answers, but Harlem offers collective amnesia. Privately, the relief is palpable. Mothers let their children walk to school without the paralyzing fear that has governed their movements for months. In the quiet of their kitchens, they understand what happened and who did it. They are grateful. 3 weeks later, October 7th, a new dealer from Newark tries to establish operations on 135th Street. Ignorant of recent history, he lasts exactly 4 hours before two polite men in clean suits escort him to Penn Station, purchase a one-way ticket, and deliver a message with crystalline clarity. Bumpy Johnson doesn't give third chances. The dealer boards the train without argument. The lesson holds. December 1964. Snow falls on Harlem like absolution, blanketing the streets in white silence. The neighborhood has not become innocent, only disciplined. Crime persists because crime is eternal in places where opportunity arrives late and leaves early, but the chaos has been reorganized. The old codes govern again, children remain untouchable, families exist outside the geometry of retribution, public disrespect triggers calculated consequences. Dealers look twice at their customers. The boundaries between civilian and player are reinforced with steel. Michael Johnson returns to his geometry textbooks in January 1965. He graduates with honors that spring, his valedictorian speech never mentioning the 72 hours that nearly ended his future. Howard University accepts him on full scholarship. He studies law with the intensity of someone who understands how fragile survival can be, eventually becoming a civil rights attorney defending the same community his uncle protected through fundamentally different methods. He never touches drugs again. Not once. He becomes the living proof that Bumpy's intervention succeeded, the clean branch that grew because the rot was surgically removed. Vincent Torino transforms into something more durable than memory. He becomes mythology. His execution evolves into urban legend with the speed of all cautionary tales that contain sufficient brutality to warrant retelling. In barbershops across 5 boroughs, aspiring tough guys who consider crossing lines are silenced with 2 words. Remember Vinny. His dismembered body serves as a grim lighthouse, warning ships away from the rocky shores of disrespect. The story propagates through the criminal ecosystem like genetic memory, fathers telling sons, dealers warning younger dealers. This creates the central paradox of Ellsworth Johnson. Here was a career criminal who enforced a moral code more strictly than the police sworn to protect the precinct. Where the law failed to stop poison flowing to children, a gangster succeeded through calculated terror. He was simultaneously the disease and the vaccine, the poison and the antidote, turning brutality into community protection through the application of absolute consequences. The final accounting is brutal in its simplicity. Vincent Torino was 26 years old when he died. His murder remains officially unsolved, the case file gathering dust in a basement archive, a bureaucratic acknowledgement that some questions are safer left unanswered. No arrests were made, no charges filed. Off the record, every detective who worked organized crime could tell you who ordered it. None could prove it. 4 years later, July 7, 1968, Bumpy Johnson collapses from a heart attack while eating fried chicken at Wells Restaurant on Lenox Avenue. He dies not in gunfire, but in the arms of his childhood friend, Junie Bard. His funeral draws thousands who line the streets in complicated respect for a man who drew lines in concrete and enforced them when no one else would. Today, the corner of 135th Street and Lenox Avenue is gentrified beyond recognition. Expensive coffee shops stand where corner dealers once held court. Tourists walk safely where bodies were once dropped as messages. Was the violence justified? Ask the children who grew up to have children of their own. Ask the families who didn't lose sons to poisoned heroin. Ask the community that survived because one man decided that respect wasn't negotiable. History doesn't offer clean answers, it only offers consequences. And in Harlem, consequences were written in blood and carved into legend.